This really is a host's worst nightmare. You rent to a guest, they show up, and then they never leave and never pay. What's dangerous about Airbnb is that you are giving possession of a piece of real estate, by definition, to a complete total stranger without any assurances that they're good for the money. If they only book for a few days, they can get in your home for just hundreds of bucks. Unlike regular tenants who will pay thousands of dollars and pay security deposits, first and last month's rent, etc. So in a way, Airbnb is a highly dangerous way to put your place on the market. But there are ways to protect yourself. The woman who inspired this video, unfortunately, is going through that case where she rented a private room to somebody who is now squatting, and she doesn't understand her rights enough, the law enough about innkeeper's rights to defend herself.
Straight to the kitchen.
I ain't going nowhere.
Yo, door, this is my house. How about you get the out of my house?
She also doesn't know what she's allowed to do in order to make her stay, or her guest's stay, now unbearable. So in this video, I'm going to teach you the measures of prevention you need to take to prevent from having a situation where you're unable to remove a guest. And if you're in this spot right now and somebody is squatting in your home, I'm going to give you a hack that I've used twice to get somebody out of my house. Let's jump in. Welcome back, family. Your short-term rental expert, 7 years experience, 5 years teaching, 120 doors, over $10 million revenue on Airbnb. Sean Theodore Rakicic. Pleasure to meet you all if you're new to this video. And this could be one of those videos where you're new because you might have a squatter in your house right now. First, I want to talk to you about prevention. If this does happen, there are ways to stop it. And this happens surprisingly more often than you think. If you look at the hotel space, there are plenty of people who do what's called an overstay or a holdover, and that is where somebody pays to have access to a hotel room, or in this case a short-term rental, and then they just don't leave. Hotels have built their whole buildings around this concept of trespassing and holdover, so that way they keep a card on file for incidentals. They can charge you when you stay. They make it so that there's room keys that get deactivated. Makes it really easy. They have security inside to escort you off the property, and they've made it very clear with local authorities that the way their business works, that the person staying in these rooms don't have tenants' rights. State to state, there are going to be laws that influence what you have to do as a innkeeper or a bed and breakfast or a hotelier to make sure that you establish your rights and that contractual barrier between tenancy and a transient guest. So I highly encourage you to go look on Google for innkeeper laws in your state and then go from there to fill in the gaps for what I'm about to teach you now. But a fun fact, for example, here in Texas, one of the innkeeper's rights is if somebody causes more than $100 of damage or theft, that is a felony against an innkeeper. So if you're ever in a space where you're of course dealing with a holdover and you can make the claim that somebody has committed a crime to the tune of more than $100 in damage, which you could even consider their holdover to be theft of service greater than $100, you can file a felony charge against them. And that could be your little hack for getting them arrested. All you have to do is prove to the police that you are an innkeeper, you have innkeeper's rights, and that perpetrator has damaged you by more than $100. Welcome to Texas. You're under arrest. Knowing your state laws can be highly, highly friendly. Now, in order to pull this off, you're going to have to be a business. You need to form an LLC. Even if you're just some little mom and pop, we're gonna rent our room out when we're on vacation like this woman, you need to form an LLC, you need to identify it as a lodging company, and then you'll need to rent your property to that LLC. So if you do arbitrage like me, we already do it. We get a landlord to give us a whole floor of a building, rents it to our LLC, which is, of course, the short-term rental business, and then we conduct our business from there. This makes it really easy to argue that a person doesn't have tenants' rights because the lease is going to be to a business with no occupants on the lease, and then the person has paid you some way, and if it's on Airbnb or VRBO, there's going to be a digital paper trail online showing that somebody booked transient housing for a very short period of time, that this is not their primary residence, and they've agreed to stay as a guest on one of these platforms. That enough should be your way to be able to make an argument to the police officer that you are a business, you allotted person's possession as a transient guest, and the moment that their reservation ended, they were trespassing. This should be enough. Let's say that the police just don't agree with you. Well, first off, you should ask to speak to their sergeant. You can always do that. So if a police officer says that this person is actually a tenant, you go and say, I need to speak to your sergeant, because police officers don't tend to know the law, and it's not really their job to know all of the law like a lawyer. They need to know enough to get by and make their judgment calls, and a lot of what police officers do is based on judgment. So you have to speak to somebody's sergeant, and you tell the sergeant, we are a business, we can show you the paperwork, we'd like like you here on site, so that way we can provide to you proof that we are a business and this is a hotel and this person is trespassing, so you can actually make the proper arrest. Thank you. There's a phrase I've heard that possession is 9/10 of the law. What kind of makes this sticky, if the person is in the home, it's really hard to get them out of the home. But the moment the person is not in the home and you didn't forcibly remove them is a moment that you can essentially lock them out. And just like they claim that you were lying, right? When you say this person's trespassing and they say, no, I'm a tenant. If that was a lie, well, now that you've locked them out, if they're not a tenant, now it's a dispute of fact. Like, I'm a tenant in this home. Be like, no, they're not. They're not a tenant. They don't have a lease here. They don't have anything active. We are a hotel. This room is a hotel room and we have another customer coming in. This person was a hotel guest. See Airbnb, see the lease. So now that there's a dispute, you tell the police officer, no, this person can't have access back into the home. Call your sergeant. There are only rare instances where if you're not prepared with the right documentation, a police officer will then force you to let them in only if you didn't have the proper paperwork. Let's say you're in that kind of spot that you can't make the proper case because you didn't file an LLC and set up as a bed and breakfast and you don't have the proper signage around the home and all those things. Now, depending how long someone has stayed with you, there are two ways to remove somebody. One, if your paperwork is good, but they stayed longer than a month and they actually could have tenants' rights based on the length of time that they stay, you'll need multiple properties to do this. But something I've done, instead of having an adversarial relationship with somebody who's overstayed, right? Let's say they stayed a month and a half and then they're overstaying. You already know that they have tenants' rights because of how long that they've stayed. It's gonna be really hard to prove otherwise. So instead of becoming adversarial with that person, you kind of have to play dumb. Now, you'll need a second property. And what you'll do is you'll tell them, hey, I know that you're trying to find a way to make your payment, whatever, like act like you trust them. And you'll say, I've got another booking arriving like in 2 days. I've got another property for you. Can you please move to this one and we can sort out your payment later? I just need to be able to not lose this other booking. You give them the keys to the other property and let them relocate to this new property, this new address. And then as soon as they move to that new address, you then lock them out of the original one. And then within 24 hours later, you call the cops for trespassing because this person doesn't have a booking with you. Now, this then nullifies the fact that they had tenants' possession of the one for 6 weeks because they willingly gave back possession of that property. They already gave that possession back to you. So they no longer have a right to that property because they willingly gave back possession. And this is something that I've done. Now, of course, I'm not a lawyer. I've had many lawyers counsel for me, but I'm not an attorney. So if you're in a situation like this and you want to pull this off, please consult with your own attorney to see what the ramifications of this could be if it went south. Once somebody's in that second unit, they have their time clock for tenancy resets because it is a literal different dwelling. It's a different address. So that'll work. The final case, let's say that you don't have any paperwork to prove that you are a business. You're running it from your social out of one of your homes, just a regular average host. And the person's only stayed 5 or 7 or 10 days. In this case, if you have nowhere else to put them and you have no arguments to make with the cops, what you're going to do is you're going to remove all of the furniture. And I've done this twice and it really worked. In Houston, I had a guest that was a serial squatter on Airbnb. They went from one property and squatted until somebody kicked him out and they used a different account, went to a different Airbnb and squatted. And the guy's name actually started to get passed around the internet about 4 years ago and people started to find out who this guy was. So he would not leave and he had a gun in the property and it was really hard to try to get him to comply. We even sent the cops over multiple times. In my desperation, I'm looking for a solution because of course we're paying rent on this door and I decided, let's go for it. Let's remove all the furniture. I called the police and said, hey, we've had a dispute with this person who claims to be a tenant in my home. This is my home. All the property inside is my property. I'm going to go into that home and reclaim my possessions because my name is on the lease or my business is on the lease, and I'm going to go recapture all of my furniture. He's claiming he has tenants' rights to the home, which we have to dispute, but I need to obtain all of my possessions back just in case he wins this dispute. He has a weapon, so I don't feel comfortable going in there without a security officer because he's made threats before. So we had a police officer accompany us for us to send a moving company to remove everything that we owned from the home, and we emptied the place out. TV, toilet paper, kitchen supplies, bed, couch, everything we put in the storage unit. 2 days later, the guy was gone. There was no reason for him to be there. He did not have money to furnish the place because he was squatting. So when somebody steals your place as a furnished rental, if you all of a sudden make it an unfurnished rental, they don't want to be there anymore. You cannot remove the front door. You cannot change the locks. You cannot cut off the electricity or the internet or the water. And the internet surprises people, but it is a utility, and tenants' rights, tenants' laws say that any utilities that you provided a tenant when they moved in, you have to keep on while they're there. And if the internet was on when somebody moved in, you're required to still give them internet. But you are not required to give them your furniture. and this is your hack. You're also not allowed to threaten, bully, harass, or put your hands on that person. And this is where a lot of professional squatters come in. They try to badger you into saying anything that they can use in court to file a restraining order against you. And I had a girl in Philadelphia in one of my monthly rentals try to do that just the same. The worst situations I've ever had are people who've rented from me by the month directly, not on Airbnb. And the reason why those are the worst ones I've ever had are because the lower someone pays to stay at a place, the more likely that they are to default. If somebody pays by the month on Airbnb or VRBO, $8,000, $10,000 a month, they're not likely to default. If you give somebody an affordable monthly stay, they could squat on you. And I had a little townhome that was very not pretty, and just to get it off our books, we did this monthly stay, and this person stopped paying rent. So when this person became combative with me to try to, get me to say something stupid via text message, I instead just didn't respond to any of her things. I didn't take the bait, and you're going to have to be careful to not take the bait, because if you say anything aggressive or judgmental or derogatory or combative at all, then they will go to court and file a restraining order against you. So with that one, the non-Airbnb, the non-VRBO direct booking monthly squatter situation, I made the condition that if she left by December 10th, I would not take legal action against her, and I would give her a little money. When she moved out, she could meet me and get some extra cash. That worked. My other option was going to try to sue her and to try to get aggressive and to try to actually evict her, and she was ready to entrench into that property and hold it for a long time. But the multiple levers here, the little extra cash in hand, and the risk of she knew she'd lose that case eventually, and the risk of losing the case and then me coming after her for a long, long time scared her. Most people don't know that landlords really don't want to sue people and chase people down. So landlords really don't go after tenants like that for small amounts of money. If it's, say, less than $10,000, a lot of times landlords just leave it alone, because even if you win, you're probably not going to get that money from the tenant anyway. The risk that I might have dogged her for years was the reason why she considered my offer. Behave, maybe be generous in situations where you have no other path. Give somebody a carrot to chase instead of a stick, because they're ready for the stick. That's what squatters do. They're ready to entrench against all of your assaults. And the more that you struggle, the more that you look bad in court. I hope these tips helped. And if I can give you a final statement on this, short-term rentals, squatting, evictions, stuff like that, they really do happen way less often than long-term rentals, in my experience, especially if you charge a good amount of money. The whole overstay thing, or somebody staying an extra day or staying, an extra few hours, that stuff might happen here and there, but you can charge them through the platform. You could actually charge them on Airbnb for what's called a holdover or an overstay, and Airbnb will pay that. They'll charge the guest, and if the guest doesn't pay, then you can actually charge the guest through AirCover. And AirCover also has a loss of income. So if somebody holds over or stays past their checkout time and you can't get them out and you lose a future reservation, Airbnb would reimburse you through AirCover. You can even get loss of income insurance for that, for any non-Airbnb stay. Other channels don't do that, but loss of income insurance would then pay you if somebody did violate your checkout time and did an illegal holdover. So there are ways for you to, compensate yourself in the cases of those losses. This is a fun topic, so if you have questions, put them in the comments, and I, of course, will collaborate with you down there in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this video, and as always, I will see you on the other side.